This is the true story of friends who became enemies, a murdered bishop and a flogged king. It is about a man who stood up for his principles and paid a high price for it. This is a look at history. Great that you are here. Thomas Becket was probably born in London on December 21st, 1118. Some sources also give 1119 or 1120 as the year of his birth. He was the son of a wealthy Norman merchant. His father enabled him to study theology and philosophy in Paris. After his return to London, Becket entered the service of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Theobald, in 1141, thanks to his father's mediation. At the behest of Theobald, who, like Becket, was of Norman descent, Becket studied canon law in Auxerre and Bologna. After his return, he remained in the service of Theobald, who ordained him archdeacon in 1154. Theobald himself was actually supposed to serve the king as Lord Chancellor, in addition to his service as Archbishop. Due to Theobald's failing health, he recommended his protege Becket to the king as the new Lord Chancellor in 1155. A close friendship developed between Henry II and Thomas Becket, 15 years his senior, who as Lord Chancellor was not only the king's closest confidant, but also the second man in the state. He accompanied the king on his travels through England and also on his military campaigns in France. They also went hunting together, and the Lord Chancellor was responsible for the education of Henry's children, including the future King Richard the Lionheart. Thomas Becket was very fond of life at the royal court and everything associated with it. He amassed a large fortune, hosted lavish parties, and traveled, for which he had his own horses and ships at his disposal. On April 18, 1161, Becket had been Lord Chancellor for 6 years, when Theobald of Canterbury died, leaving the most important episcopal seat in the entire kingdom vacant. In order to increase the crown's influence over the church, King Henry supported Becket's consecration as bishop. He assumed that Becket would also remain in the position of Lord Chancellor and combine both offices, the most important and significant in the country after that of king. Through Becket, Henry II would thus have been able to take control of the church, including in matters of property and jurisdiction, and overcome the separation of church and state. Thomas Becket was appointed Archbishop of Canterbury on June 3, 1162, after being ordained a priest the day before. Becket, whose reputation and lifestyle did not actually make him a suitable candidate, radically changed his life from then on and got rid of his luxurious lifestyle in a very short space of time. He dressed simply and donated the majority of his income to the poor and needy. Much to the annoyance of the king, he resigned from the position of Lord Chancellor against the king's wishes in order to devote himself fully to his appointment as Archbishop. The Archbishop resolved to defend the rights and independence of the church and to prevent royal interference in church affairs. This led to a rift between Henry II and the Archbishop of Canterbury. From then on, differences of opinion defined the relationship between the two, as the king attempted to undermine the archbishop's authority and limit his power. In particular, the controversial question of whether ecclesiastical or secular courts had jurisdiction over criminal clerics led to open disputes in 1163. Becket first agreed to the king's demands, only to later revoke them without consulting the other bishops. Henry II had his former friend sentenced by the royal court for treason and enmity, forcing Becket to flee to France on the night of October 13, 1164, where he was personally received by King Louis VII. At the time, France was considered a preferred place of refuge, which the popes also sought out when the situation in Rome became too dangerous. Pope Alexander III rejected a request for Becket to resign from his church duties and advised him to go to the Cistercian monastery in Pontigny. However, as he was in danger there from Henry II, he spent most of his exile in Sens. After negotiations between the king, Pope Alexander III, and Becket, the archbishop was able to return to London after 6 years on December 1, 1170, to great rejoicing from the population. New conflicts quickly arose, as Becket excommunicated the bishops of London, York, and Salisbury for attending the coronation of the heir to the throne and co-king Henry the Younger, which took place during his exile. He justified this with the prerogative of the Bishop of Canterbury to perform the coronation. This led on the one hand to the co-king refusing to receive the archbishop and also restricting his freedom to travel, and on the other to a fit of rage on the part of Henry II, who, lying on his sickbed, is said to have exclaimed, What wretched drones and traitors I have fed in my household, who let their masters be treated with such shameful contempt by a run-of-the-mill priest." 4 of the knights present interpreted Henry's exclamation as a royal order to kill. On December 29th, they appeared in Canterbury and demanded that Becket bow to the king's will. When he refused the demand and also rebuked the intruders for refusing, they attacked him and smashed his head with sword blows. A cleric close to the king, who accompanied the knights, scattered some of the human remains on the floor of the church. Meanwhile, the murderers plundered the archbishop's possessions and fled to Scotland on the advice of Henry II, who did nothing to pursue them. After a short time, they returned to their estates. Pope Alexander III then excommunicated the murderers and sent them to the Holy Land as crusaders to do penance. Their fate, and whether they returned to England after some time, has not been conclusively clarified. The murder of Thomas Becket had far-reaching consequences for the history of England. It led to a wave of outrage and turned Becket into a martyr for the Church. Public opinion towards Henry II deteriorated sharply, and he was forced to repent and recognize the authority of the Church. The murder of Thomas Becket also had political repercussions, as it strained relations between England and the papacy. The Pope forced the king to repeal the constitutions of Clarendon, a series of laws passed during Becket's exile to restrict the power of the clergy. He also had to endure a humiliating scourging in Canterbury Cathedral and spend a night kneeling and praying at Thomas Becket's grave. Just 3 years after his murder, Becket was canonized, partly due to the intervention of Matilda, wife of Duke Henry the Lion and daughter of King Henry II. Matilda and Thomas Becket knew each other and were on friendly terms. In 1174, Henry II praised Thomas Becket as his personal patron saint during his penitential visit to Canterbury and was instrumental in establishing his veneration. Relics of the martyr were presumably taken by Henry the Lion and his wife Matilda to his home in Brunswick, where they are still kept in the cathedral today. Thomas Becket can also be seen on the coronation picture in Henry the Lion's Gospels, presumably created around 1188 as one of the saints important to the ducal couple. Thomas Becket was buried in a shrine in Canterbury Cathedral, but King Henry VIII ordered the shrine to be destroyed and the body burned in 1538. When a skeleton was found under the cathedral during construction work at the end of the 19th century, it was believed to be Becket's mortal remains until they were reinterred in the early 1950s. Nevertheless, Becket's grave is still one of the largest and most important places of pilgrimage in Great Britain. Thomas Becket is an example of the challenges and opportunities associated with the pursuit of independence and the defense of principles. Becket faced the difficult task of defending his beliefs against a powerful king and ultimately paid for it with his life. On the one hand, Becket's assassination was a shocking act of violence that sent the whole of Europe into turmoil. It was seen as a direct challenge to the authority of the Church and a violation of the sanctity of the clergy. On the other hand, some argue that Becket's assassination was a result of tensions between church and state. King Henry II, who was initially a close friend of Becket, attempted to control the church and limit its influence. Becket vehemently defended the independence of the church and refused to bow to the king's demands. Thomas Becket ultimately paid for his conviction and steadfastness with his life. Thanks for watching. You can find even more videos on my channel. Activate the bell to never miss a new one in the future. See you soon, and bye-bye when we take another look at history.